going to be holding its presidential election. But this is one of the few countries where the central candidate, the central person, the central character, the most important character is not actually running for office. And that is because the country's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, he really has more sway over this country than any of the nominees. CNN's Reza Sayah is out front in Abu Dhabi for us tonight. And Reza, I mean, the Ayatollah, I saw one woman, she had basically a necklace around her neck with the two supreme leaders since the revolution saying vote for them. The supreme leader is so central to this election. How much sway does he have over it?
He's got a lot of sway. Iranians are going to be voting for a president tomorrow, but looming very large over this entire process is the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. Very few things get done without his approval, and analysts say that includes the outcome of tomorrow's vote. In the race for Iran's presidency, the one vote that matters more than any other, analysts say, is this man's, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
I think it's going to be very difficult for any candidate who isn't approved by the supreme leader to become elected president.
The supreme leader is Iran's highest political and religious authority, overseeing the armed forces, the judiciary, and foreign policy. He also has final say on U.S. relations in Iran's controversial nuclear program. In television debates, candidates seem to refer to the leader just as often as they refer to the Iranian people.
They're essentially, they're not running for the job. They're almost, auditioning for the supreme leader.
Long before Khamenei began his 24-year rule as supreme leader, he was a key figure in the 1979 Islamic Revolution that toppled the U.S.-backed Shah of Iran. An assassination attempt in 1981 maimed his right hand. That same year, he was elected president. 8 years later, he succeeded Iran's first supreme leader, Imam Khomeini. Analysts say Khamenei has stayed true to regime policy, holding a tight grip on power, keeping enemies at bay, at home and abroad. During his reign, he has defied Washington and the West's demand for Iran to stop its controversial nuclear program. At home, rights groups say his regime has jailed thousands of dissidents, journalists and activists, many during the 2009 opposition uprising, sparked by two reformist candidates who are now under house arrest. It's no wonder analysts say that this time around, not a single bona fide reformist was allowed to run for the presidency.
Above all, he wants someone who's going to be subservient to him.
And if history is any indication, what the supreme leader wants, he usually gets.
Thank him, and then it will. And Reza, it's amazing, like I said, just the focus on the supreme leader here from the candidates. I'm going to do what the supreme leader wants, to some of the people on the street, especially the more conservative ones, who invoke his name when they talk about this election. But obviously he's getting older. He's only the second supreme leader since the revolution. How is his health?
Well, there's been all sorts of rumors throughout the years, Erin, about his health, that he's sick, that he has cancer. But he's been motoring along, and he appears healthy when he makes public appearances. He looks healthy. He looks energetic. His aides say that he exercises, that he hikes often. But he is getting up there in age. He is 73 years old. And it is possible that the next president who's elected, especially if he serves 8 years like most Iranian presidents do, could be in power when the supreme leader passes. And many say that's going to be a critical transition, maybe the most critical transition in the history of the Islamic Republic, Erin.
It certainly seems like that will be the most important one. And of course, as Reza says, people saying that the people running for president right now won't be able to change the nuclear program. But if they're in power when the Ayatollah changes, then of course that could be the most important thing that has happened here. All right. Well, thanks very much to Reza Sayah. AmanPour joins me now. Of course, she's Iranian by birth and has covered every election in this country since 1995. And Christian, when you look at all the different elections you've covered and what's at stake this time, what makes this one different for you?
Well, the two that stick out in my mind, 1997 is when Mohammad Khatami was elected, and we covered that, and that was an enormous surprise, both internally in Iran and around the world. It was a reform candidate who won. And for 8 years of his presidency, there was a real change in Iran Iran and with Iran's relations with the rest of the world. Then I covered the 2009 election, which was when Ahmadinejad was going for re-election. That, as we all know, resulted in the Green Movement, resulted in people saying that the results were flawed. It was a huge movement that was brutally repressed. And now what we're seeing is an attempt by the Iranian authorities to make sure that nothing like either one of those happens again. They don't want a reform candidate to win, and they certainly do not want to see the kind of mess that happened after the last election, which was broadcast around the world when people were, as I say, brutally repressed and people were killed and people have been imprisoned. And indeed, many bloggers and journalists and others are in prison right now ahead of these elections, so that there isn't the same kind of expression as there was last time.
And of course, the man ultimately in charge of all of that, the Ayatollah, and we just heard Reza profiling him. I mean, there's only been 2 supreme leaders since the revolution. Obviously, he's older. What would happen if there were a transition?
Well, look, he is in power until he dies. That is the way of the constitution and of the religious theocracy there. So Ayatollah Khamenei stays where he is until he dies. But what is going on right now, according to many analysts, is that Iran has become increasingly militarized. In other words, the Revolutionary Guard are in every aspect of Iranian life, the economy, politics, culture, media, everywhere. And what's happening is that the Revolutionary Guard want to make sure that they have their kind of candidate there and who want their kind of candidate to win. So analysts say to me that their number one choice would be the mayor of Tehran, Ghalibaf, as you just mentioned, and then Saeed Jalili, who is the current nuclear negotiator, and then Ali Akbar Velayati, who is an aide to the supreme leader and who is somebody who's conservative, but has also dealt with the West in the past. The only surprise might be if, as some analysts tell me, there is a last-minute surge towards Mr. Rouhani, a former nuclear negotiator and somebody who now has the reform movement behind him. Unlikely, but that is the only surprise that could happen, Erin.
All right, certainly that would be incredible if that happens as people go to the polls in a few hours. Thanks so much to Christiane. And we are just hours away from the first elections in this country since 2009. 2009, the election that is the one that's probably seared in your memory with some of the horrible images of what happened to protesters on the streets. Why is it so different now, and why is it so crucial for the United States? A special report out front next. And then a bakery, sort of a middle-class, upper-middle-class neighborhood. We had a little hunger today. We went in, and look at this. Angry Birds and Beyond, one of the nicest bakeries I've ever seen. People were still shopping despite the sanctions, even though it took a wad of rial notes to pay for things because prices are changing so quickly. Are sanctions working? Our special investigation coming up.